KKHT wants you to meet three of the classiest guys in real estate.
I am Chris Kelso, the maestro of mortgage.
I am Rob Cook, the godfather of real estate.
And I'm Joe Orsack, the king of credit swing. And together, we're
the Real Estate Rat Pack.
Much like us, real estate right now is smoking hot. So whether it's buying, selling, or owning, you need to check out the Real Estate Rat Pack.
They're here to take your calls and answer your questions live. Call now 1-800-808-5548. And now, the Real Estate Rat Pack!
Okay, get it over.
You'll never get over that, Rob, will you?
No, there's got to have some modicum of dignity here, and we just lost all of it. So.
When did that start?
Really?
Did we ever start it with any dignity?
Yeah, well, I thought, it was my hope
we'll have
and
to look into that.
hopes and wants.
Right.
It's
what's the definition of that?
in the dictionary. So
Writing that down.
let's do a shout out for Capital
How do you
Title.
spell modicum?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We don't talk about Capital Title nearly enough. But we did an event out there out on Louetta Road in the spring. Capital
without
Title.
billing them anyway.
Well, of course. I'm not sure the check cleared yet, but we'll find out. But anyway, Laura Kroon is their marketing rep over there. And,
Fantastically sweet gal.
And she did a bang-up job getting that thing prepared. And, we brought all our stuff in and had a big event for the realtors out there. And so I just want to thank them for their hospitality and doing such a great job. We got some great closers out there. Got
She was the cause of
Abbas is out
She was
there.
the cause of me
Yes.
getting home about an hour later.
Yes.
Because I stood around chatting with her after the event for I don't know how long.
I think she was there for the duration. In fact, we had several people who decided that they were
Close
going
the
to
house
make it an
down.
all-night event.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, and we had a great time, and we're gonna do it again.
I would absolutely agree. I think it was a lot of fun out there, and more importantly, the facilities are absolutely
They were
top-notch.
really nice.
Yes.
They were really nice.
Yep. Really nice. A lot of space, a lot of good stuff, and the closing
Beautiful
rooms were
location,
incredible.
actually,
Yes.
And I know that Laura had gotten several calls from realtors and saying that was awesome.
Yes.
Because nobody was trying to sell to them; they were just there to mix and mingle. So it was a really nice event. So anyway, moving on.
The Rat Pack knows how to throw a party.
The Rat Pack does know how to throw a party.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
and we have a great subject today.
We have a cool subject today.
we have a
really,
subject?
really neat subject.
I was
get the email.
just running with that.
Okay. No, we actually are going to talk about new home sales versus resale.
That is correct.
And right now, as you know, in Houston, we have 2.6 months supply of homes, and that is a historic low. And when I was at Austin last week, Texas Association of Realtor, one of our marketing people, they're actually putting a campaign together statewide to tell people this is a great time to list a home.
It really is.
Rates are low. The bond market actually dropped a little bit.
That is correct.
And so what's our rate as of Friday?
Rates are still on the 30s, hovering in the low 4s, and your 15s hovering in the mid 3s. We've got that perfect storm right now, I told everybody, in which Houston real estate is still extremely affordable as compared to the rest of the nation. You've got interest rates that are extremely low, and you're in the number one city in the world, to be honest with you, in Houston, Texas.
Absolutely.
Well, we've always known that.
Yeah.
The rest of the world just catching
I think
on.
they're
That is
discovering it. But let me tell you, since I am seasoned, as you like to refer it,
That is correct.
yes, I remember in the
A little
80s,
salty.
we were selling homes at 18%.
I know.
And when we got to 10% around 1990, I thought we had died and gone to heaven.
When I bought my first home, it was in the 10s. And I thought, I saw it as it was my home was
And that
being
was a
built
fixed
at that
rate.
time. Exactly. And I was like, wow, I got all the way down to 10.
We had those negative AMLONs back in the 80s where, it was really 18%, but you're buying it at 13%, but you're accruing.
Thank God those are gone.
Oh, yeah, after all those foreclosures.
Some awesome news as well for Texas. I promoted it quite a bit on Facebook because I think Texas is the greatest place in the United States. That Texas has surpassed California in technology exports.
Really?
Yeah.
So we are the number one tech exporter in the United States.
Wow.
You get low regulation and people who really understand that business drives the economy, and they make it easy for people. We're like the 11th in the country for doing business. Guess
Wow.
what was number 50? New York.
New York.
New
number
York
50.
was number 50. Worst environment for business. What a shock.
And I could see that. I was actually up there. I lived in New York City when I first moved back from Mexico. Lived up to New York City for about a year. And let me tell you, I had a restaurant in New York City, and the regulation around it was by far one of the hardest places, being in Texas, being in Mexico, being in New York City, very difficult. And the labor situation was even more difficult. So I'll tell you, we definitely are blessed to be here in Texas, more importantly, because of everything. The labor situation, the fact is that we've got, really good amenities for the Houston market. And, every time I have somebody complain and say, the freeways are under construction again, I tell everybody, let me tell you, I've lived in places in which you don't have freeways. So trust me, let's enjoy what we've got here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We always have amazing guests on the show, and we want to make sure our listeners have the opportunity to chat with them. We are known for bringing on experts on the show. 800-808-5548.
And you know who we have today?
We have
Walt Simmons.
The
Walt
Simmons.
Formerly of radio and television
The
fame.
Sultan of Sales.
He is with Legend Homes, and he sells out in Katy. Welcome. Let's give him a microphone so he can talk.
Why not?
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's an honor to be here this morning. I appreciate you all inviting me on the show. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow. Something crashed into the window over there.
A blind failure here?
No, I think we're doing good.
Well, as it happens, we also have a caller right now.
That is correct. We
Wow.
absolutely have a caller right to start off the show with.
There we go.
You just give out the number and they start calling in, Joe. Be careful.
Yes. Last week, Rob was not here. We had a tsunami of phone calls last week. It was insane. We just opened up the phone lines for questions about credit and mortgage, and I think we took about 12 calls last week. Craziness. So
It was nuts. But
We have Nancy hanging on the line right
Nancy,
now.
Nancy,
are you there?
how you doing?
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Oh, okay. I do have a question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
let's shoot.
Okay. Well, what do I need for a down payment on a home? I'm not really concerned about my credit score. I think that's good, but what do I need for a down payment?
Well, the answer to that, it depends. You want to field that?
Sure. The good thing about down payments is depending upon what type of home you're buying, it really depends more on the type of program you're going to qualify for. So you got loans out there for veterans. A VA loan is 100% financing up to 417. You have a USDA loan, which is 100% financing for your rural development areas. You've got an FHA loan, which is 3.5% down, maximum financing up to 295, 550. And then you've got your conventional loans with 5% down. So down payment's going to really vary, minimum down payments, according to which program you do. And which program you qualify for is going to depend upon what the price of the home is, what your credit scores are, and then more importantly, what you can afford to buy and make sure within the numbers that you qualify there.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there were that many different programs.
You got choices.
Okay. Well, you've answered my question. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for
No
calling
problem,
in.
Nancy. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling in.
So that's kind of have that question right now, Walt. What do you see when in your tell us where you are in Katy, at your subdivision, and talk about your product line. Then we'll talk about what you see typically as your profile buyer.
We are Legend Homes, and we're located in the community called Stonecrest, and it's right in the heart of Old Town Katy, just north of I-10, right at the Grand Parkway and I-10. And we just opened 2 brand new sections, Section 5 and Section 6, and we've got 84 new lots in Section 5 and 6.
So about 3 days worth of inventory.
That's about right. That's about right. The inventory homes, we're selling our inventory homes at foundation and frame stage. It's amazing, and I've never seen that before in the market.
Right.
In my 14 years of being in this industry. So, it's a pretty dynamic thing going on right now. And Katy is a really hot area. The schools are fantastic. We're right there on the west end of the petroleum corridor where all the oil companies and engineering companies are moving in. I believe we've got Geico who's coming in over there in that area.
That's correct. They've already got their offices up over there.
Bringing in 5,000 employees. All those folks are going to need homes for themselves.
Berkshire Hathaway company.
Yes, absolutely. That is correct.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
So it's real dynamic right now in Katy, and I invite everybody to come out and see us there at I-10 and the Grand Parkway right there in Katy on the north side of I-10.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your product. We were talking about this earlier. It used to be that everybody wanted the big 2 stories, have this very impressive elevation and stuff, but you're finding more people are going to 1 stories, and you're finding that you've got a variety of different types of people buying out there. You've got people who are downsizing, people are getting their first homes, singles. So let's talk a little bit about the buyer that you have out in that area.
That's another interesting dynamic that I'm seeing right now that I've never seen before. The fact that most of my home buyers are purchasing 1-story, 3-bedroom floor plans. That's the largest buyer set that I'm seeing. I've never seen that before, so that's one thing that's interesting.
But if Joe was to buy his wife Kim a home, you do have a 2-story plan that you could probably put him in, right?
Absolutely. I've got 4 2-story floor
There it
plans,
is.
and I've got
I got it out of the way early this time.
You worked that one in right up front there. Yeah.
we've got plenty of choices out there. We've actually got 18 different floor plans out there in Stonecrest,
My
and we
wife
started
was at home
14.
taking notes.
Kim, 18 floor plans.
And the most expensive one is.
Yeah, exactly, right? Oh, and by the way, they build all over the city, Joe, so a lot of options in where you want to live.
Absolutely.
Kim, we can set you up.
You know, I've actually worked with Legend Homes for a number of years now. Great company. Have been to their corporate offices over there on 1960 a number of times and have spoken to the crew. They're a great company.
You know, we have another caller.
That
I think
happens.
we started a trend last week.
Yeah.
We did, actually. It was crazy.
So
Just for all of you out there listening, if you're unable to get to the phone or be able to get in, we're also on Facebook. You can reach us at facebook.com/real estate rat pack. For those people who don't want to get on the phone, a little nervous about that, you can post a question on Facebook, and we will try to cover it here on the show, too.
So
Who do we have on the line?
We have Susan,
on the line.
Susan, are you there?
Yes, this is Suzanne.
Oh, Suzanne, I've got Susan's here on the Suzanne.
That's okay.
Thank you for calling. What is your question?
I'd like to know what are the most important questions to ask when buying a home, a used home.
Well, we actually refer to as resale, and we have someone here.
An expert on hand to answer that question. So that is actually a great question. We have a show that's a regular kind of a reoccurring theme, and we call it "What You Don't Know Can Hurt You," and that question right there is the perfect question. When we talk on that show, that's the question to ask. I don't know what I don't know. So
Exactly.
how do I know what questions to ask if I don't know the questions to ask?
Let's get on with a quick
So-
introduction and on with the question, which is we get from Remax. We have Jenifer DeGray Mikeska. Welcome.
Hi, guys. How are y'all?
Good. And so we have a question from Suzanne as to what is the most important question to ask when you're buying a resale. And we avoid that term used.
Yes, it's not new.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
definitely not used in resale, but definitely a question that I get all of the time. The first thing that you want to do is get pre-approved for a mortgage. You want to know before you go. You want to know what you qualify for, the type of loan that you're going to qualify for. And then from there, you want to know what location. If you have children, you want to check out schools. You really want to get to know the area. I always encourage clients to drive through neighborhoods, get a feel for
Okay.
it, because it's not just about the location, but it has to be a good fit for yourself and your family.
Okay.
So hopefully that's a good, helps you a little bit anyway.
And typically,
Yes.
and I know most realtors will do what we call a need analysis. We'll usually sit down and when the first sit down to talk with you about what your wants and needs are, and kind of analyze this. What's important, where do you play, where do you work, where do you recreate, where do you go to church? All those things are going to be a factor. And then, of course, some people are very fearful of having like a 1920s home, but they're real comfortable with buying a home built in the 2000s. So, there's a lot of factors involved. And that usually gets found out in that first interview.
Yes, always encourage people to interview agents too. You want to get along and have that connection with somebody.
I was just going to say, I was going to say right there, one of the biggest things we always push in the show is work with experts. And when we come back from the break, because we're about to have to take a break here, when we come back from the break, I want to give you a question, Jenifer, for our listener here, which is, what are the best questions that she should interview her realtor with?
All right, great.
Suzanne, that answer your
that's
question?
a great question.
So when we come back from the break, stay tuned, and we'll answer that question for you.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Show. We
The
always talk
off-air
about
show.
the off-air show. That is correct. We always talk about between the breaks how much fun we have. We cannot stop laughing and joking around and having a good time. That's what it's about. It's about having fun and educating.
It is fun to enjoy what you do.
That is correct. I absolutely agree.
So, as always, we have tons of calls coming in, 800-808-5548. We are talking about new versus resale, and we had Suzanne who asked a great question about what questions to ask. Jenifer, I had a question for you going out of the break here because I think this will really help as well. When they're considering going out and looking for a house, we here on the show, and we're biased, but there's a lot of stats behind this to back up what we're saying, The experience is always best when you work with a professional real estate expert, right?
That doesn't sound like a question.
Yeah, that's a statement, right? So, how do you find that expert? There's a lot of people out there that sell houses and claim the moniker of real estate, but that doesn't make them a real estate expert. We only bring experts on the show. So, for our listeners there, when they're interviewing someone like yourself, what questions do you think they should ask?
Well, one is how long have they been selling in that area? You want to find out how long they, been there. How well do they know the communities? I myself have lived in Pearland, went through Pearland schools. I can tell you the ins and outs and, everything blindly. The important thing, too, is you want to ask around. Ask your friends, your coworkers. Get some referrals. That's usually the best way. But you definitely want to have that connection with someone. It's very important.
Yeah. Now, do you allow yourself to be rated on HAR.com?
Well, you know what? I do, but I have some glitches going on. So I have them working on it at the moment.
Well, I can tell you, most consumers nowadays, first thing they do is they go look to see what's their rating, what are other people saying about them. It's very important. It's like on eBay. If I buy on eBay, the first thing I do is I go click at and see what the negative and what the positives were. So, we have a caller on the line. And so, caller, are you there?
I am.
Yes. Who am I speaking with?
This is Angie Lattimore.
Oh, Angie
Lattimore. She's, hey, you doing, Angie?
I'm fine, thanks.
Angie is an excellent agent up in the Kingwood area with Covenant Realty.
We're dear
She's up
friends.
in my neck of the woods.
We've known each other for a long time now. So, Angie, what's your question this morning?
Yes, I have a question for Chris about financing. I want to know, is financing different for new construction versus resale property?
Great question.
That's a great question. We get a lot of that. That's one of the things that we talk about. And Angie and I, I always tell, for full disclosure, we do a lot of business together. Angie's a great agent up there. And, that is probably one of the questions we get a lot is, what is the difference between financing for a new home versus a resale home? And the answer is none. The answer really and truly is financing is available for all homes. Whether you're buying a new home or whether you're buying a resale home, it's the same thing. If you're buying a home that qualifies for VA, you can get in on a new home or resale home. If you're in a USDA zone, same type of qualification. The misnomer out there, though, is that, guess what? I can go and get a new home for cheaper, financing-wise, than I can a resale home. And the only major difference is, and we can talk about this as well, sometimes the builders have incentives, right? And those incentives sometimes can lower certain closing costs or provide certain incentives to be able to get in their own homes. That doesn't mean it's better financing. It's just there's incentives associated with that, and a lot of times those can even be negotiated on a resale property.
And they're basically trying to save the upfront cost of getting into a home.
That is correct.
Those incentives and things like that.
That is correct. But great question, though, and financing across the board is financing, whether it be a new or a resale property.
Well, here's something I had to happen in our office, and we actually had a new home sale, and they, of course, did some upgrades, and lo and behold, it didn't appraise.
Wow.
Are you seeing any of that? Angie, are you seeing any of that in your market?
Not on new construction, but on some resales, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've been experiencing resales for some time now, but that was the first time I'd seen it on a new construction.
Right. And new construction, the appraisals, generally speaking, the builders are very good, and Legend can talk about this, very good about understanding what to build and what they can support price-wise.
Right.
I mean, I've seen it plenty of times that a new home salesperson will call me up and say, man, what does their financing look like? Because they want to over-improve the property. And so we have those discussions ahead of time. And that can perfectly happen. But where you're really seeing some appraisal issues sometimes on the resale side of things. Unfortunately, fortunately, there's been a lot of appreciation going on. That appreciation is really good, but the bad side is it takes sometimes the appraisals a little while to catch up because all the data has to catch up to it.
Right. They typically, right now, they're probably going back only 3 months for a lot of it because there is so much activity.
That is correct.
They're not going back 6 months, which is actually to our benefit.
Right.
Because if you go back 6 months, they might have been actually lower. It's prices are escalating in new construction. While you can verify this, it's not because of anything other than the cost of building it has gone up exponentially. There's you're getting back to the places where sheetrock is getting in shortage, lumber's getting shortage.
Oh yeah.
And then of course finding people to actually put it all together. There's a shortage. Are you finding that to be true?
Absolutely. There's and not only that, there's also a shortage, believe it or not, in labor in these guys that put the homes together. It used to be that the build time on a brand new home was 4 months, and now we're seeing build times of 6 months, and that's that's what you can expect now, a build time of 6 months. So those are some more dynamics that are going on right now.
Something on the financing side that's worth mentioning, I think, with the question on new versus resale. Something like working with a builder with Legend, they're very tuned into credit, and basically anybody. Again, we were talking about this before the show with Walt. Improve My Credit USA and Legend has worked together for a long time. They are tuned in and aware on the credit side, such that when, as Walt said during our before the show conversation, anybody that wants to buy a home can buy a home. Right? They just need to know what to do. And if you're working with somebody that understands that process, you come out and look and you have credit challenges, well, they can still work with you. They get you into our system while we're working with you. They're still communicating with you on the build side. Once you get within range of the score they need, they start the build process. So you can get that process rolling and started, and that's kind of an advantage on the new side that you don't have on the resale side. Whereas if you're out looking, if your credit's not where it needs to be and the house is available to sell, well, it's in this market, it's probably going to be gone by the time you're ready to buy.
Hey, Angie, did we answer that question for you, by the way?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
By the way, just in case, if anyone's looking for a good agent up in the Kingwood area, what's your number?
713-859-3989.
And she is awesome.
And she is awesome, absolutely. Angie, thanks a lot for calling the show. We appreciate it as usual.
Thank you.
So it looks like we have another caller.
It's, once we start these calls, they just start coming in. It's absolutely crazy.
800-808-5548. We've got
Joe on the line.
Joe's
Joe,
on the
are you
line.
calling?
I'm calling in. I wanted to talk to myself.
Caller, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. What's your question?
Hi, this is Joe Callahan. Hey, Jenifer, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I listened to you this morning. You sound awesome.
Aw, thank you.
Hey, I wanted to caveat on piggyback on the comment about financing for resale versus new homes.
Sure.
I'm a veteran myself, and I work a lot with veteran loans. And Texas Veteran Land Board, actually, there is a difference when you buy a new home versus resale. And a resale home or a new home requires a EPA rating at Energy Star or a HERS rating of 75 or less, as to where a resale home does not. Something to consider as a real estate agent if you're working with a veteran who's looking at doing VA and adding Veteran Land Board to their loan.
Yeah. Did you purchase a home using VA or the
I
land?
did VA, but I do quite a few veterans myself, and Texas Veteran Land Board
Okay.
is a great benefit. And if you do piggyback that on, you do go through a new home builder, they have to be Energy Star or have a HERS rating of 75 or less.
That's a great comment. That's a great comment. And I take it you're a full-time realtor?
Actually, I am, but I'm activated right now in the Air National Guard, so it kind of a little bit of both.
Gotcha. But, hey, we appreciate your service.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, Joe.
And I love y'all's show. I appreciate it. Love listening in and get some good information from you guys.
You bet.
Well, and you just gave us some great information,
gave
too.
some great
Thank you
information,
so-
absolutely.
And
And I
we're
know
getting
I'm sorry, I was going to say, I know our builder wanted to chime in on the HERS ratings as well.
Well, Joe brought up a real good point. Energy Star is something that most builders are a part of. Now, we go a step higher at Legend Homes, and we are actually an Environments for Living builder, which the moniker for that is EFL. And EFL is a standard that is higher than Energy Star. And what the builder has to do as part of the EFL program is he has to build with certain standard features, as standard, such as radiant barrier underneath the roof decking. That has to be standard. Polysealing around all the doors and windows and baseboards has to be standard. Digital thermostats have to be standard. Double pane low E windows have to be standard. Ridge vents on the top of the roof have to be standard. Now, with the Energy Star builder, all of these features do not have to be standard. As a matter of fact, a builder can put Energy Star appliances in the home, and which most appliances are, and call themselves Energy Star. But what EFL does, and what that means is that your heating and cooling portion of your electric bill is actually guaranteed for 3 years. And that goes a long way. Our homes at Legend Homes are extremely energy efficient, and that is something that you definitely want to look for when you're buying a new home, because you don't want to get you don't want to get a good deal on a house and then get an energy bill in July of $300.
And that might be something that people make a decision on resale versus new construction, is the fact that, the new homes are a lot more energy efficient than an existing home that was built in the 1970s. In retrofitting, it's not that easy to
even
do.
the 90s. I mean, I've talked about that a couple times on the show, that my house was built in 91 and single pane, terrible windows.
Legend Home was built all over the city. And they actually built up in that Kingwood area, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, we have another caller on the line. We have Ann on the line. Are you there, Ann?
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm in the Houston area, and I have a piece of property in the Austin area, and it's up for sale, and I have a realtor, but I don't really hear from him very much, and it's been, over a year, actually maybe a year and a half, and he doesn't really communicate with me, so I don't know, like, do I need to get a different realtor or what? Could you comment on that, please?
I'm never going to throw another realtor under the bus. However, if a house hadn't sold in a year's time, there's probably a couple of elements creating that. Usually, we find that it might be overpriced for the market. I don't know the Austin market that well. I was just in Austin last week, and I know, talking to the agents, they have less inventory than we do, and so they're selling pretty briskly. So I don't know your circumstances, but I would certainly think that communication with your realtor would be really important at this juncture. Jenifer, wouldn't you agree with that?
Well, keeping the lines of communication is always open. I don't care what relationship you're in. That is a key factor.
Yeah,
So,
I definitely would recommend getting, in some sort of dialogue with your realtor and say, look, this is a year, is a really long time. We're seeing houses on the market, like hours in this market. And
Well, I heard your comment about you need to interview your realtor, and I really kind of don't know him. I just kind of picked him. So maybe that's part of the issue.
Well, you have a written listing agreement with him, I'm sure, or her. And so, review that and then open up some dialogue and say, this isn't working for me. And, it might be time to move on. And you know what? If you had to listen that long, he might be ready to move on.
and one thing people may not realize is you can call one of your friends or agents that you have here in your area and get a referral from them because we have contacts in other areas.
Yeah.
So that's always another avenue.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we're coming up against a break
We're
again.
coming up against a hard break here, so when we come back, we'll add some more information on that. We'll be right back after a break and a word from our sponsors.
And in the morning, they don't say goodbye.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we are back. Time flies when you are having fun, let me tell you.
Can you believe it's already 9:31?
Already 9:31 this morning. It's
We are
crazy.
talking about new versus resale, and there are pros and cons on both sides. I know we have already tons of calls coming in. 800-808-5548. You can also post your questions on Facebook.com/Real Estate Rat Pack. And for our last listener with the property in Austin, I would encourage you to go to our Real Estate Rat Pack page and post your home there, post some information there. And we have an amazing network of incredibly good realtors. And I
Yes.
bet we can make some good connections for you and get something going on
We
there.
actually have a great realtor right here.
Right here in studio,
Yes.
right next to me, actually.
Absolutely.
Here's the thing that we haven't asked the question yet. The question, which is our theme. Someone's out looking for a home. Do you take them to resale? You take them to new home sales. And when you're having low inventory, I think the new people are actually benefiting by that because we don't have a lot in the way of resale. So what are you finding out there, Jenifer?
Well, right now it boils down to time frame. When do you need your home? There are some great inventory homes, however, they're very limited. And then, of course, price range because new homes are higher price per square foot. So it really just boils down to those two things.
Okay, let's talk about that first interview. You talk with them, and they're not sure which way they want to go. And so what do you tell them is the advantage of a resale, and what's the advantage of a new home?
Well, I think as Walt mentioned earlier, when they're talking about the energy efficiency of a new home, that's always a great benefit to have the double pane windows, the radiant barriers, things of that nature. However, with resale, you have the other benefits of taking advantage of tax exemptions that are already in place, which is awesome. So you have your homestead exemptions that, will already save you money, where you won't be able to claim a homestead exemption until the, first of the following year. So if you're buying a new home this year, you won't be able to file your homestead exemption until next January and get that advantage on that tax break.
Well, and one of the things also that I've always seen out there, because obviously we work on both sides, and tell me if you see a lot of this, but there's also a difference. Sometimes you can buy, and this is what's told to me a lot of times, is another difference in considering new versus resale is the upgrades that sometimes individuals have put into it after they've bought the home. Shutters, for example. I'm just using some examples. Shutters and and sunrooms and some of the decorations, et cetera, that might be able to
kitchen.
outside kitchens, et cetera. Not that it can't be built with Legend, for example, but sometimes how much does that play into effect of what person's looking for?
Well, that makes a huge difference because a lot of times clients don't want to have to pay for those upgrades, or maybe they're not in a position where they're able to pay for those upgrades that they really desire. So purchasing a home that's like new, maybe just a few years old, where the original person who purchased the new home paid for all those fabulous upgrades, those wood floors, maybe even a pool. That's a big one there because that's a huge expense if you were to build. If it's already there, hey.
Yeah, you get back maybe 25% of what cost of a pool. You put a pool in because it's a lifestyle. And I'm going to open that up because we talked about this I don't know how many times. People aren't really buying homes anymore. They're buying lifestyles. And so, Walt, I'm going to ask you this. When people are walking in there, and what are the amenities that they're looking for? They're looking for the outdoor kitchens and granite countertops. And what are they buying?
They are. They're first and foremost, they're buying the community, and they're buying the builder, and they're buying quality of construction, and they're buying the school district. And we have all that in Katy. Katy's one of the top school districts in the state. But as far as the amenities go that are in the house, Legend Homes, our niche is that we provide more standard features than most builders do by far.
Kind of talk about some of those features that you are standard in their upgrades with other builders. Talk about those.
One of the big differences is our appliance package. We provide the full appliance package as a standard build as a standard feature in our homes, and that's something you don't see with hardly any builders. Side-by-side refrigerator is standard. Range, of course, is standard. Dishwasher standard. Microwave oven over the range that vents to the outside is also standard. We also provide a washer and dryer for the laundry room as a standard feature. 2-inch faux wood blinds on all the windows throughout the whole home are standard with us. So our homes are move-in ready.
That's awesome because, that's one of the big expenses. You buy this home, and, of course, you go see the model, and it's all dolled up, and then people go buy a house, and they walk in, there's no blinds, there's no appliances, and they're going, wow, the home is just a down payment for the accessories I'm going to have to buy. Type of thing.
That's right. Our homes are move-in ready, and many more standard features as well. I could go on forever. It's a long list.
Well, you can go on for like 23 more minutes. That's
well, it's especially for the first-time home buyer, because I experienced this myself when we first bought. For us, it was like, is the layout of the house what we want? Is it pretty? All this sort of thing, and we just didn't think about some of the things like, okay, we have these massive windows that are facing into the afternoon sun, and it's going to, make the downstairs baking hot. I had no clue to think about that. You know what I mean? So little things like that, don't hit the first-time home buyer and new home buyer's process. And maybe this is just my take on it, but I wish as a first-time home buyer I would have went the new home route for that reason, because I think some of those things like that are covered without you not necessarily being aware of it. It's an easier in for the first time. That's just my 2 cents.
I'm going to pose this of Jenifer. Some of the things you can't get in a new home is location.
Oh, yes.
And
you can always improve your home. You just can't move the location of it.
And one of the things that people will buy a resale is because being closer in a lot of the new home subdivisions are a long way from downtown Houston or where they work. So do you find people are making choices based on being good proximity to their work or play? Or
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would say the majority of my clients who are moving to our area in Pearland are primarily moving to our location because of the distance to and from work for both the husband and the wife or whatever. So we are conveniently close to downtown, the medical center, so we're a straight shot down 288, which makes it a great, easy
When I did a lot of production,
access.
I would always, at least once a year, go down to Pearland to sell somebody who was in the medical field. When 288 used to be, you could actually traverse 288, and that's going to be like one of the busiest little highways.
Yes.
In north and south. And so you've got Silver Lake was one of the areas that was a master plan community down there. And so those are actually homes that have been built. How many years ago is that?
Well, they originally started in the late 80s, 88, 89, in early 90s. And then we hit another growth. And then, we've now have Shadow Creek Ranch and Lakes of Country Place. Now we're getting, we have Silver Creek, which is actually Manville, but Pearland Schools. So there's a lot of growth coming still right along the 288 corridor.
Well, I've watched that Pearland area just blossom over the years, and it's just incredible because I used to think along the way, Beltway 8 came in, the Sam Houston Tollway, and that just made it absolutely accessible. I can actually get to Pearland from where I am in about 25 minutes. So
yes, it's easy to get anywhere from there. It's a great central location.
So anyway, when you were with a new customer coming in and they're talking about amenities and things like that nature, are location ever an obstacle for them? You're out in Katy and they're working somewhere maybe downtown. Is that something that they talk about, or usually that you got oil people coming in?
Well, the people are buying in Katy for two main reasons. The biggest being the schools. Katy ISD has, one of the top ratings in all of the state of Texas. Of course, the Katy Tigers were, number one in the football for the past, 5 years in a row or something. The real powerhouse. A lot of folks.
And those Katy folks like their football.
But all the schools are top ranked, every one of them. So it's the schools are a big deal, and we're right at the west end of the petroleum corridor, and so we have a lot of people who are purchasing homes from us who are engineers and who are in that field, that industry. And we also have the new medical center right there, with Texas Children's Hospital, Memorial Methodist, Christus St. Catherine's. And that medical center is growing, and we have a lot of nurses. We have a lot of people in the medical community. We also have a lot of folks who are retired and who are downsizing in their new homes. So that's what we're seeing out there.
Okay, you'd actually asked a question on the break one time about, let's talk about credit scores and things like that. So when someone comes in and they say, I've got a great credit score, and I'm not going to have any problem buying the house. What have you found?
How often does that actually work out?
Well, Joe, and you can address this. Is a lot of people go on those sites where you can pull your own credit, and typically what we're seeing is that the credit you get off those sites is higher than your actual credit, and maybe addresses why is that.
Well, and here's the fun, and it, went from the lending side, it makes complete sense. From the consumer side, it makes no sense at all. And in fact, when the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, good Lord, I couldn't say all that. When the first paper that they put out, the first study they put out was on credit scores and how the massive variance in all the different credit scoring systems out there actually causes financial damage to consumers. Because what happens is they pull a score, they see a score, they think it's good, so they go then to purchase, and now they have a different score. So they end up getting inquiries when they weren't in a position to actually do something or buy. And the reason for that is this, is that from the lending standpoint, the scoring model takes into consideration what the purchase is. So if you go to a car dealership, for instance, they're going to weight car payment history more heavily when you're looking at a loan for a car. So your scores may be higher when you go to pull a car loan because your car payments were good. So then you go off to buy a house and your scores are a lot lower, and you're like, well, what happened? So it's completely confusing.
And a very good point, because that's probably something that comes up all the time is, I just got through going to freecreditreport.com or whatever it needs to be, and I pulled a 650. I'm using this as an example. And then when we pull a 590. And we tell everybody because those scoring models vary. Yes. The scoring model in buying a car, in buying a mortgage, or buying a home in this case, and your general, what we call consumer-based credit scores, are all going to differ because of those algorithms.
Now, I still recommend, here's to be an informed buyer. First of all, work with an expert. That's always my rule of thumb. So work with a credit expert when it comes to your credit. ImproveMyCreditUSA.com, shameless plug.
Got it in there.
If you talk to a credit expert, we work with a consumer-based score so that it doesn't hit the inquiries. We don't want to do a negative ding, and we use one that typically is within 10 to 20 points maximum off, and we are aware of that, so we're telling you what a buffer you need to have to be ready. So we can pull your credit, look at your credit. It's a consumer-based score, and hey, if you come back with a 680, 700, chances are you're going to be in good shape when you go back to speak to a lender.
What score do they use, Joe?
FICO score, Fair Isaacs Corporation.
And
that
it's-
is the all-important score.
Let's talk. Can you talk a little bit about the mid score and what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know our producer was just showing us that it is the break time. So as soon as we come back,
I
we
think
will
that'd
answer
be
that
a
question.
great thing to talk about when we come back.
I kissed her and she kissed me. Like the fella once said, ain't that a kick in the head? The room was completely black.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
Welcome back.
We're back.
You know, we got to record the break.
Yeah,
I hear so much
There's always good dialogue.
dialogue on the break.
You know, it's so funny because this happens all the time. It's in the break when the guests and the host ask questions. So it's like, hey, I don't want to ask this on the air because I don't want to put you on the spot or whatever else. And then we ask this, serious question, and it's a great answer given back because the person we're working with is an expert. And we should just ask them on the air.
Well, we had an idea one time to do a show called Between the Break.
Yeah, between the break show.
I think it'll sell.
Yeah.
So, and Jennifer and I were talking on the break, and we were talking about when I was doing production is the first thing I do when someone came to me, whether buying a resale or a new home, is I didn't take them out until they've been to Chris and find out what their credit scores are. So let's talk about what do you have to have.
Well, you have to have a credit score.
Yes. No, well,
That's a good start.
let me be more succinct in the questions.
That's a start.
Some
people actually don't have a credit score. That does happen.
What's a minimum credit score that someone can get into a house?
So it depends on whether you want reality or do you want fantasy.
I don't think fantasy does well on closing.
Exactly. So, the famous fantasy programs that I hear about all the time, those 580 programs.
Yes.
If you would fit in a 580 program, you wouldn't have a 580. Because a lot of times those programs say you have to have additional down payments. You can't have late payments for at least 12 months. You've got to have an institutional VOR, which is a verification of rent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So the reality of the situation is that most of your deals on your government loans are starting off at 620. Okay? Your better ones are starting off at 640. For example, you can do an FHA loan at 620 all day long, but your better deal on an FHA loan is really a 640. Okay, so those are things to look at, and then obviously you've got on your VA loan, you've got 620 minimum on your VA loans. You've got on your conventional side of things, you can do a conventional at 620 as long as you're putting 20% down and get DU approval. And so there's several variances you really have to look at. DU approval meaning desktop underwriter and or loan prospector, which are Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So you have a lot of different things to look at, but I tell everybody is credit score is only one portion of what you really have to look at. If you look at QM today, so your debt-to-income ratio has to be on a lot of your conventional loans 43% or less. Governments, for example, we're still going up to 50%. Not that you want to sell everybody to 50% DTI, but you have a little bit more flexibility right there. The new 3% rule went into effect.
DTI is debt-to-income.
That is correct, your debt-to-income ratio. And so there's a lot of other things you look at. Credit score is where you start off with. But then I will tell you, I've had people who have credit scores of 680s and don't qualify because of some of their bad debt that they still have on their credit. Because one of the things that the government's come out and said is, well, if you have old debt that sums up greater than $2,000, you either have to show a payment history on it or count a portion of it against your debt to income ratio. So there's a lot of changes that are going on what they're doing. And so I tell everybody is, number one, and Mark and I were talking about this during the break, now's a great time to buy a home. And everyone, if you put your mind to it, can buy a home.
You meant Walt, of course.
Walt, sorry, Walt, yes. It might not be today. Yes,
Walt.
is that Walt, yeah. It might not be today, but you can do it.
Yeah, that I wasn't seeing somebody that was in the
Mark
studio.
just left.
Yeah, no,
He was here for
we
the
were
break.
we were talking about Mark, and then I messed up. Sorry about that, Walt. But Walt and I were talking about that is, if you want to buy a home, just because you don't qualify today, and this is what I tell people all the time is when I have to tell somebody you don't qualify today. But I tell them is, but if you want to take the next step, if it's credit repair, go to Improve My Credit USA. If it's down payment, start saving today. At least put a plan in place so you can obtain that dream.
God, what an idea. A plan.
A plan.
And implement the plan and work the plan.
Exactly. Well,
What
the
an
other
awful
thing I
idea.
tell everybody also, and this is one of the things I think is the biggest error in the industry that most people forget to do, is if you're out there and you're listening today and you're out there looking at buying a home, before you do anything, work up a budget. Work up and see where you stand on your financial planning today. Work up a budget. Don't walk in and say, I want to buy a $200,000 home and put 3.5% down if your budget's $1,000 a month. It's not a reality then to get into a home for that. So I tell a lot of my clients is make sure you go out there, that you financial plan correctly, that you have a budget in mind, and that you can afford that comfortably, and then engage in the process.
Well, Chris was talking about Mark Wahlberg, who we were going to have on the show today.
That is correct. He's part of my entourage.
He's been in the green room for the show, and it looks like we're not going to be able to get him on, so we'll have to have him on next week.
So
no Wahlburgers.
No Wahlburgers.
No Wahlburgers today, but we'll send Mark your love.
Okay.
So Walt, let me talk. You've got someone coming in. They're very excited. They're going to get a brand new home. They've looked at the model. They're excited, and you sit them down. Kind of talk about what you're going to counsel them about credit and getting that done. And
well, I think we just touched on that. They've got to have. We want them between a 620 and a 640. To get the best interest rate that they can qualify for, and we're interested in the customer getting the best deal that's going to meet the needs for their family. So step number one is we'll have them fill out a credit application. It's real simple and easy. We do it right there in my office online. It takes about 10 minutes. It does not cost anything. It does not ding their credit report at all. And we can know pretty much instantaneously where they are. And if you're going to go to Dallas, you have to know where you are first, before you can get there. So first we got to know where we are. And we go from there.
Yeah, and I never seen your eyes get that big, Joe, after that statement. You said when you said it doesn't ding the credit. What's your opinion of that?
How do you? Well, that's a whole nother show. How do we pull credit? One thing I wanted to ask about in that process was when a person comes to look at a new home with you. Like for us with our client, we have things that we need for them to begin the process, right? So when a person comes to look at a new home and they sit down with you, if there was something to streamline that process, to make it smoother, if they were coming in to you to sit down the first time, I don't know anything about buying a home, is there something that would streamline the process for them in the application process? Or they just sit down and you ask them a series of questions and that's it. It's easy.
That's a real good question. We have our own in-house mortgage company, First Choice Mortgage, and Sarah Spadola was won the Prism Award for the top mortgage loan officer for the builders last year.
Right next to Chris, of course. Chris being the top mortgage loan officer.
So we've got that going for us there.
That's cool.
But when a customer is applying for a new home loan, they're going to need 2 months bank statements. They're going to need their past 2 paycheck stubs, and they're going to need their W-2s and their tax returns for 2 years. If they would have that would be great.
Makes the process go a lot easier.
For everybody.
Absolutely.
If they would have that, that'd be great.
Of course, it would be a lot simpler if they would just pay cash.
Yeah. You take checks?
Well, cash is good. We tell everybody buying a home in cash is absolutely, there's nothing wrong with it. But for those who can't afford to do it, they still need to get financing. One thing Walt was talking about is, a pre-approval is not just running credit. And that's, what you mentioned is good. You need to make sure if you're out there looking, be prepared with your 2 years tax returns, your most recent paychecks, and proof of funds to close. And walk in and truly get an approval based on what you actually are showing. Especially true for self-employed borrowers.
And that's why you're talking about that. What popped in my head was season funds, because I've seen people put, they're getting a big bonus. Maybe it's February, and they're getting their bonus from last year, and they put it in the bank. How long is it going to be there?
See, a bonus is not a problem. You see, here's where season fund comes into play, and we see this a lot. Oh, well, I generally have cashed my checks. I don't deposit them in my bank account, so I've got everything in cash. Guess what? I can't use cash as a documentable down payment. So that was where you'd have to
get that money out of your mattress and put it in the bank.
That is correct. So there's different things. If you're getting a bonus from your job, that's absolutely fine. I can document that. I can show you have a bonus. It's money goes in your bank account. I can close the same day on that. That's not a problem. So a lot of times the seasoning of funds, we see this all the time also. Where is this large deposit from? Oh, well, I sold a vehicle to my cousin, a couple of years ago, and he finally paid me for it. Well, guess what? Do you have a bill of sale? No, I don't. You got to season those funds.
Yes.
So there's things like that you have to end up going through and seasoning. It's not everything, but you have to know what's available out there.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenifer, I want to make sure folks know how to get a hold of you.
Well, they can reach me at 281-844-5969 or visit me on the web at listwithjen.com.
And that's JEN?
JEN.com. That's
no
right.
2 N's. List with Jen.
Yes.
You know how many times I've typed an email to you and I'm like, why is this not coming up? It's because I put 2 N's.
I know, I'm the oddball.
And we're getting kind of towards the end of the show. What would you like people to take away from you being here today?
One, I want to make sure that they understand that no matter where you're going, if it's finding a realtor, finding a mortgage loan officer, you need the expert, which y'all have been preaching the entire time anyway. Make sure you understand the entire process, get educated on both sides of the fence. So that's important. So,
Walt, how do folks get a hold of you, buddy?
They can come see me in Stonecrest at I-10 and the Grand Parkway, or they can give us a call at our office out there at 281-391-1125. It's a great time to buy a home.
And what would you like people to take away from your visit today?
You know, if you're in the market for a new home in Katy or anywhere else for that matter, come on out and see me. I'd love to talk to you. I will educate you on the process, and I will spend time with you, and, regardless of who you choose to buy your home from. So come on out and see us.
Legends it builds a great product. I've always liked their houses.
They have a sister company called Princeton Home, which
yep.
is their higher end homes. Are they out there also in that area?
We don't have Princeton homes in our specific community, but we build the Princeton product, and that's our higher end product, but all over town.
Well, as usual, we are out. We're down to a last minute here. We always want to thank all of our sponsors for being a part of the show. Jason Jimenez Insurance Company, Ashley Bowles, AB Bowles Home Inspection, Capital Title, the wonderful Capital Title, who we just had a great party at, Berkshire Hathaway Properties, Willow Bend Mortgage, Improve My Credit USA, and I'm probably missing somebody, I know. Oh, we have a new sponsor coming on, Miracle Frames. That's
John Long.
John Long. So we wanted to give them a shout out. John, if you're listening, we're going to have them on in the upcoming month. So anyway, I don't know how I can't see the screen. So we're down to the last 10 seconds. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, look us up on Facebook at facebook.com/Real Estate Rat Pack. Post your questions there for next week. We're going to have Jim Mackingvale, the Mattress Mac, on next week. So be sure to tune in. And until then, we are out.
Good job.
And you've been listening to the Real Estate Rat Pack. The question is, who's Frank, who's Sammy, who's Dean, and who's the other guy?
Chris is Frank,
I'm
he's
Dean.
Dean, and I'm Sammy.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So tune in to the really big show every Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on 100.7 The Word, KKHT.